So very good morning to all of you. So welcome to this FDP on smart cities for third day, and shortly we are going to start the first session. So before starting first session, so we will introduce this session speaker, Ms. Ruchi Agarwal, by Manasa faculty member of our department. So over to you, madam. Manasa madam.
Good morning, all. When you talk, you're only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new. So, with this hope, let's begin our third day FDP on smart cities. So, we are fortunate and privileged to have Ms. Ruchi Agarwal today as our speaker. So, it is my privilege to introduce Ms. Ruchi Agarwal, ma'am. So Ms. Ruchi Agarwal is an urban planner on a mission to create sustainable and livable cities for all by applying community-based, unique approaches to address the challenges faced by our global ecosystems. She leads her own practice as an independent consultant and holds advisory roles in some of the most groundbreaking and innovative planning projects across USA and Toronto, such as City of Toronto's Digital Infrastructure Plan and Policy, Online Comprehensive Plan for Johnstown, Ohio, Onboard Public Transit User Analysis New York and North Carolina, Coordinated Public Transit Human Resources Plan, Scioto County, Ohio, integrate drones and US technology into planning practices and more. She is also specialized in transportation and land use planning, while she has integrated for sustainability and equitable community engagement practices. And she is also an urban journalist on urban affairs in India, a rising entrepreneur, and has delivered several talks and trainings to a variety of different communities. And she has been involved with uh, so many organizations. So she is invited by the Directorate of Urban Land Transport, DUL, to provide comments on Bangalore's comprehensive mobility plan. And prior to making purposeful shift towards urban planning, she has held a managerial role at Schneider Electric, where she has managed many projects, and she holds a Masters of City and Regional Planning degree with a focus on integrating technology in planning, community engagement, and sustainability, where she has secured that degree from Ohio State University, and she has also done her Bachelor's of Electrical and Electronics Engineering from Dayanand Sagar College of Engineering, VTU. So she is our alumni of DSI. That's what's so great, ma'am. So we are very fortunate and privileged to have you today. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. That was a great introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ruchi, and as Manasa ma'am just introduced me, I am an urban planner. I have my own practice as an independent consultant, and I work in US, and currently I'm based in Toronto. So good morning, and I'm going to be speaking on the topic of transportation, public transportation, and urban mobility within the smart cities idea. I'm going to present my screen. Please, can you
Share it.
confirm that? Yes.
Yeah, it is visible.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so you're able to see, I just want to
Yes.
confirm that you are able to see the full presentation, right?
Yes, Ruchi. So you can go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you again for having me here. It's a great privilege to be back to Dan and Sagar institutions, and this time not be a student, but be presenting. It's amazing to be back. Thank you, and let's get started. So today, our objective for this session is going to be to understand the complexity within cities and how they interact with urban transportation systems, to understand the role of digitization in transportation infrastructures, and to provide mobility services. And by reflecting on successes and failures in implementation of smart mobility concepts from around the world through a few case studies, we will understand that each place is different and solutions applied or should also be different. And not only technology, but also institutional and citizen support is crucial for successful implementation of smart cities. So moving into a brief overview of what cities are, because I'm a planner, I like to talk about cities. Cities are socio-technical systems. They are very important economically, ecologically, socially, culturally, politically, and also with the technology systems that we have today. Cities are places where people live and work together, and different people look at this living and working together from very different perspectives. There are people like economists and migrants who come to the city looking at it as an economic engine that generates wealth and jobs. So society, socialists, activists look at it as a social system, the way of life, cultural life, social life, activities, and all those kind of aspects. Closely related is also political systems, in how different actors interact with each other, who make these decisions, and who has the real power over what. Thirdly are our environmental systems or ecological systems, in which we employ bioecological approaches. It focuses on vegetated areas, air, water, and non-human organisms that make up the urban fabric. Fourth is what concerns us with smart cities idea is the technological systems. These are typically the infrastructures that constitute a technological system of a city, such as listening to music on our speakers or watching an environmental documentary on our TVs. And so the technological layer, we can say, is harnessing all the other layers and providing us the benefits of all the other layers. Apart from the technological infrastructure that I just spoke about, some of the other key typical infrastructures in the urban environment are present here. These infrastructures are put in place as physical and organizational structures and facilities, such as in the social layer, we see houses, we see buildings, and in the economical layer, we see financial institutions. In environmental systems, we see water systems that helps us bring water to our taps. We have all of these infrastructures that help cities with its operational needs. Urban infrastructure lays the city's physical foundation for daily life, and from public utilities to waste management to transit and a lot more things. So typical infrastructures, if you look at them, is transportation, energy, water, wastewater, waste, land uses, such as housing, buildings, industrial factories and things like that. And also the social spaces where we can go to play. Urban infrastructures enable collective living, and all of this works in a very systemic fashion. So as a system of systems, cities are interrelated and interact with each other, which makes it very complex. The most important concept here to note is that it has a lot of feedback loops. So all these elements of the system interact with each other. Within each layer of the system, each of its components interact with each other, whereas across the systems also they interact with each other. And all of this create feedbacks. For example, the way technology works affects economy. The way economy works affects whether we have the money to buy that technology. Better economy brings more people into the city. More people may cause stress to the environment, or give rise to the need to create better, greener technical solutions. Even within technology, things talk to each other. For example, do we have the ability to use a cell phone to make a phone call to get a transportation, an ambulance to come help us out? You get the idea. So this very systemic view of the city is where everything is connected. This is what makes cities very, very complex, and the outcomes of what happens in the city is not attributed to one single cause. All of these are also very path dependent. That means that the decisions that have been made at some point in the past will begin to show their effects later in the future. That is, whatever happens today is probably a cause of several things that have happened in the past. For example, in Bangalore itself, the establishment of special economic zones after the recession in the 80s and the 90s helped in economic revitalization. It brought jobs, it brought international investment into the city. But the special economic zones gave tax incentives to these companies. What happened because of this? There was less funds, reduced taxpayers to maintain the public infrastructure. And we can see that in Bangalore. That's probably one of the big reasons why there is crumbling roads, potholes, high levels of traffic and pollution. Now, all of these systemic view of cities have implications on the management and the governance of the cities. Good governance leads to performance indicators. Some of these indicators can be measured in the form of efficiency, resiliency, and sustainability of the cities. The feedback loops, the complexity, the path dependency, and the performance measures. All of this together make up complex, unpredictable systems and something that needs to be taken into serious account when we manage and govern cities. Now, moving on, we should also consider how infrastructures and people interact with each other. People living in places impact the urban infrastructure and vice versa. Infrastructures can enable the way people work, live, and make decisions, but also the other way around is true. For example, the availability of transportation infrastructure can help a person living in a particular area to work in a place that is far from them because of the availability of that bus system or the metro system. But now imagine you are living in a place that snows a lot. Now, if the infrastructure is not maintained and if services of snow removal are not brought in, then bus stops will not be accessible and people will not be able to use this infrastructure. So typically in a city of such complex socio-technical systems, both infrastructure and the social life of the city decide how it functions. It's useful to note here that infrastructures reach people through the means of services. It's through the services and the provision of services that people can interact with urban infrastructures. For example, a railway line is an infrastructure, but regularly scheduled and clean trains are a service that people can use. Otherwise, there's no reason, unless you want to take a nice photograph, for people to interact with railway lines. Quickly looking at how all these different social systems, city systems interact with transportation specifically. This slide shows transportation intersection with social systems. It determines how places look. For example, in a crowded bus, the social fabric of developing highly populated cities in a crowded bus may be very difficult in times of a pandemic like COVID-19. So that shows how society and transportation systems interact. Looking at environment, polluting, high emission vehicles, and back in the day, animals being used for transportation, all of these caused intersection between transportation and environment. Even with public transportation over here, is it really a good idea to use this bus? Not really. It's probably a very old bus which needs to be replaced because it's polluting a lot. Transportation and economy has a good connection too. We have trains carrying goods across kilometers and miles that boost the economy of a place. new technologies, new car companies like Tesla now coming into Bangalore, allowing people to own luxury cars and boost the economy again. Jobs in the transportation sector also help in economic development of the place. Now, technology and transportation interact in so many different ways. Just the idea of technology invent has allowed us to have cars that look like this from back when they were just carriages. We are able to use smartphones, GPS services to go from one place to another, even in cities that we don't know anything about. So now that we have seen how transportation and city systems interact with each other, let's move into the idea of smart city. What really makes all of this smart? Smart is the idea of digitization on top of each of these systems. This is a fifth layer, the data layer that comes on top of all of the other previous systems we spoke about. The concept of smart cities was originated in 2000s by IBM in the wake of the recession, and it gained a lot of recognition really quickly. There is no one definition of smart cities. The conceptualization of smart city varies from place to place, from country to country. And even within India, it looks different from every city and every town. It is the aspiration of the citizens, the willingness to change and reform, what really makes a city smart. Smart cities, however, have one thing in common, and that common thing is the use of technology and digitization, particularly information and communication technologies, or ICTs. This help in creating efficient and affordable systems for all our urban challenges and to create more sustainable and resilient ways in which we use our resources, which results in cost savings, energy savings, improved delivery systems, quality of life, better reduced environmental impacts of our actions, and all of this. Now, for a smart city to really work well, all of these 5 layers should work in balance. Now, really quickly, I want to go into what digitization really is. So let's start with data generation. As you have observed, data generation comes from many different sources, from cameras to sensors to even the handheld devices and the smartphones that all of us use. This is constantly generating data and storing data in the small device. But as more and more data is generated, more and more storage is required. So that is why we have gone from just using floppy disks and small storage spaces to big cloud systems. The other important layer is the communication and networks layer, through which data is transmitted. Now, there is traditional infrastructure using LAN cables that can be used, or through wireless systems, which are ever increasingly growing from 1G to 5G and even 6G maybe, and Wi-Fi and satellite systems. We have networks that allow multiple devices to be connected to each other through protocols or physically connecting them together. And then finally, we have identification and exchange of this data. And the World Wide Web makes this possible by providing unique URLs to locate all of our data across devices. Now, when more and more devices get connected, there is a growing capacity. And more data is being generated, and hence requires more space to be stored. This huge amounts of data is ever increasing, and collectively is what we call as big data. Thanks to the internet and the World Wide Web, the data is being transmitted constantly and rapidly. This entire system of multiple connected devices together that can talk and interact with each other is what we call Internet of Things. Now there's an additional element in all of this. This is analytics. All of this data needs to be analyzed. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning tools, all of these help in intelligent analysis of this huge big data to make sense of this. Combination of all of these things, from data generation, storage, networking, Internet of Things, and machine learning, is what we call digitization. Now, implications of this system, in which these are personal devices, the implications of this are mostly either on an individual person or on the company that is providing us with either value-added services like social media and Amazon with its recommendation engines. So how does digitization fall into smart city space? Now just imagine instead of all the devices, we have things that we use in everyday life. All of these are generating data. This is being stored, transmitted, and analyzed in the exact same fashion as before. So the implications of this kind of data generation, collection, storage, and transmission doesn't impact just one person or one company, but it impacts multiple people, in fact, entire cities. One thing to note here is that when it comes to cities and managing cities and the millions of lives of the people who live in it, only relying on artificial intelligence and machines is probably not very intelligent. There are multiple other actors who participate in the role of creating better cities. And these are our people, companies, and the government that play a role in the transformation. So how does digitization work for transportation? Just replace everything with all the various modes of transportation we have in the city, get them talking to each other, and connect them. Think of all the different modes of the cities being connected, of course. And then it's not just about being connected. What really makes them smart, it's also that we have to analyze them from a demand-driven perspective to keep people more closely connected to their journeys, and that can directly impact the well-being of the people by improving healthier movement. But it's not just transportation that we are interested in. We are interested in more. The concept of transportation can be boiled down to two parts: privately or individually owned cars and public transportation systems. Now, whether it's an old dated Fiat car or a modern self-driving Tesla or an Uber that we don't even own but can use, all of these, if traffic is the main issue in the city, a car is probably not going to resolve the problem, because a car is a car is a car. It doesn't matter how and what it looks like. During the last 20 years, we have seen a shift in how thinking about providing additional infrastructure requires various different perspectives. For example, instead of building a traditional road to increase the capacity of our transportation, which will eventually get filled by more cars, there are more reliable ways of doing that today by focusing on positive operational outcomes and customer experiences. This includes technologies that can be used for other modes of transportation, like active transportation and buses. This is expected to increase more and more in the future years. It also adds value to governments with limited budgets and also asset owners. As you can see, one big reason why we should move away from cars to public transportation is the space that it occupies. And just imagining this as moving spaces, this is the amount of traffic you face with a bus versus with so many different cars. Now, there are other key drivers to smart transportation and mobility. And these are mostly rapid urbanization, climate change, and resources efficiency and innovation in technology. Now, let's take the example of New York. In 2018, the mayor of New York banned Uber and ride-sharing services for an entire year. This was done to reduce the amount of traffic and congestion on New York Street, and also to reduce pollution and to increase the drivers' wages. Similarly, London did the same thing and Uber lost its license. Uber finally got its license back when it agreed to comply with stricter regulations. All of these reveal that the troubles of increasing private vehicles in urban spaces and highlight the urgency of needing mass efficient public transportation systems and connected mobility services. Now, within urbanization, climate change, and technology innovations, other major implications have been, for example, in the US, in 2017, only because of traffic congestion, US spent $105 billion and lost that much economically. And approximately 15 to 20% of global carbon dioxide emissions come from urban transportation alone. Even in India, we see our transportation systems are burdened, like in Bangalore. Commute times are long, average speed is low, like in Mumbai. Pollution levels are scarily high, like in Delhi. All of this also causes a lot of waste of time, road rage, and accidents. Users have poor experience, whether it be a user of a car, bicycle, or a bus. There needs to be a stronger push to make all of these systems smarter. With urban population projected to increase twice as much in the next few decades, traffic situation is only going to get worse. So this is a clear indication that urgently we need to build public transportation systems that not only resolve traffic issues, but also have low carbon emissions leading to healthy people and healthy movement and health and safe road experiences. The usage of alternative fuels going to electric using CNG, these are practices that can also be encouraged. Public transportation also increases the work efficiency and hence the economy of the place. So now let's look at how the evolution of transportation took place and how we can conceptualize on this. Now, there was transportation in cities even before the car. We had trams, we had carriages. All of this was already present, but then the car was introduced. Initially, the efficiency of our transportation systems increased. But as more and more cars started coming into cities, more and more people started using cars, and that led to a counterproductive effect, reducing the efficiency of the city. At some point, and this is, I think, where we are today. And now we need a shift in paradigm to help get this curve back up and to help increase the efficiency of our cities. Now, there are two main paradigm shifts that digitization can help bring. One is the first element is the fact that people need to own less and less things, including cars. The paradigm shift has to be from moving away from ownership to usership. The second paradigm shift is that we move away from separate, different transportation systems to one collective mobility system, in the sense that when you become a user, you don't care about which transportation system you will use. You care about reaching your destination, no matter which transportation system you end up using, but reaching your destination on time and comfortably and safely. This leads us to the discussion of how mobility services can be made smarter. So smart mobility, what exactly is that? It is various transportation systems used alongside each other, including or instead of owning a vehicle. This can take on different forms. This can integrate metros, trains, suburban railway, autos, ride-sharing systems, biking, walking, and so much more. An integrated network is it unites transportation infrastructure, communications, and energy sectors for a connected mobility ecosystem, which is cleaner, safer, and more efficient. For example, now if you can walk to the metro station, but then when you reach your final metro station stop, then your destination, maybe your friend's house who you're trying to get to, is not at a walkable distance. But if you have a mobile phone that gives you all the other options apart from the metro and walking that can help you get to your friend's house, maybe using a bus or a bike share system, that is what is called smart mobility system. This can look either as a mobile app or it can come in the form of a lot of other tools and techniques developed around the world. Now, this slide is some smart mobility solutions from IBI Group. I just put it up here because it was very interesting. I am not affiliated with IBI and I'm not recommending these, but these are good to probably get inspiration from. So now, when we have looked at, we have looked at how we transform from smart transportation to smart mobility services. Before we move into more, it is critical to look at the various perspectives in a city. Now, there are three main layers that we have been speaking about this whole time. One's the infrastructure layer, the services layer, This is where the citizens get to interact with. And then we have the smart city layer, that is the digital or the data layer. Now, essentially, the concept of smart cities is either pushed by the vendors or the developers of the technologies, or it's being pushed by cities and the governments. So what we are going to do here is compare the different perspectives. That is the vendor's perspective and the city's perspective. And we will talk about what is at stake when they don't work in balance. So from the perspectives of the vendors, they are the hardware vendors. The hardware vendors are companies that produce data generating devices like smart meters, sensors, cameras, pretty much everything that contributes to creating the digital layer. Then there's the perspective of the infrastructure vendors, companies that involve in water, in electricity, even postal services, telecom operators, and such. Then there are companies that help manage data and analytics. These are the most vocal of all the smart city vendors out there. They help in managing and integrating the data. They help in analyzing it, and they help in making sense of all this data that is being collected. Now we have the city's perspective. The city's perspective, or the metropolitan area's perspective, is of managing these infrastructures, creating smart services that ultimately serve their citizens and the businesses. So they have to look at it from a very collective point of view. Now we remember how complicated cities are. That's how complicated their job gets. These two perspectives overlap, but they are not necessarily identical. There are three things at stake. First is the citizens versus consumers aspect. Typically, vendors look at people as consumers, how they are able to push their technology and monetize on that. And ultimately, they look at consumers as of smart services that they're proposing as economy generating devices rather than everyday people, which is what the city's perspective is. The second is a demand pull versus a tech push. Digitization offers plenty of opportunities for cities, but there is a technology push by the vendors to convince cities to adopt all of these technologies. Whereas from the city's perspective, it should be a demand pull. They should ask themselves, is this technology really needed? Does it really help make the city better? Does it help improve our user experience? Will it be useful to manage systems more efficiently? And ultimately, there is the question of who is leading all of this and who takes ownership. Now, the companies can provide the companies that are providing these kind of services, are they leading the transformation, or is it the city that is leading the transformation? This is the most crucial question to be asked when we talk about perspectives. Now that we have spoken about transition, what it means is moving away from legacy systems, our old infrastructures that don't have the digital layer on it, and moving into the smarter systems, that is the digitized systems. Now, how can we move into this transition? There are two main steps. One is improvement and one is a shift. The improvement of existing transportation systems, infrastructures, and services with the new digital layer is where most of the improvements are, and this can be significantly enhanced using better and better technologies. So this is the first step towards transition. The next step is shift. That is more crucial and more difficult to attain. This is changing behaviors and lifestyles, like moving away from ownership to usership and moving away from private vehicles to integrated transportation systems and mobility services. Now, we know that ICTs are what enable smart cities. So we will focus on how ICTs can improve transportation systems. First, we will look into transportation monitoring systems. We know transportation monitoring systems are pretty much devices that are equipped on infrastructures, transportation infrastructures, and they gather data. So these devices are, for example, video cameras, speed cameras, sensors like RFID, laser, infrared, and a lot of these things. So using these, we can have a better understanding of how the behavior of all the urban systems are and can really make sense of this to help optimize. Now, there are implications of using ICTs and monitoring systems on the three layers of infrastructure, data, and services. These implications on infrastructure are such that the managers of infrastructures have to pay attention to the integration of the legacy systems with this new data layer, and if it is compatible and if it will operate well. The implications on the data layer is such that the data that is gathered, if it is accessible and if it is high performing, if it is reliable, if data is collected in a way that it can make sense, so it has to be standardized. For example, all road measurements should be in kilometers. If some are in kilometers and some are in miles, they will not be able to talk to each other. And last but not the least, the security of the data is very critical to make sure that it does not end up in the wrong hands and be misused, because there's a lot of confidential data that is being collected. Finally, in the services layer, the implications are optimization and customization. That is, transportation providers can make their transportation services more accessible with high performing and respond adequately to the demand of the users. And the users can benefit from these new services also very efficiently. For example, for car sharing, for Ola and Uber, whenever there is an event or there is a peak demand for transportation, they are able to add more cars and more services in that area to help with the peak demand and the surge in that particular period of time. Now, ICTs, apart from just monitoring systems, also help in developing automated vehicles. So, automated vehicles can contribute to the improvement of both private and public vehicles, as well as the safety of urban transportation systems. We have noticed that most road accidents are caused by human error. Now, the drive for bringing automated vehicles is to eliminate that human error, reduce the number of accidents on the road, increase the safety of our systems, and make our urban transportation systems more efficient. Traditional vehicles like cars, shuttles, buses, they are already generating a lot of amount of data, even without the digitization layer on it. For example, what is the speed of the vehicle? How many times in a week do you start your car? What's the destination it's heading to? What's the mileage? What's the speed? How often do you brake? All of this is data. Now, with the use of ICTs, this data can be used and then automated to progressively what we call self-driving vehicles. As stated by the United States Department of Transportation, there are 5 levels of automation to finally achieving a self-driving vehicle. These are level 0, which is zero autonomy, no automation level. Level 1, which has at least one driving assistance, say for example, cruise control. Level 2 is partial automation, which has at least 2 driving assistance systems, maybe along with cruise control, braking assistance. Level 3, so until now, from 0, 1, and 2, this has been mostly enabled by automation systems. But level 3 onwards, it is a combination of automation and ICTs. So level 3, this is conditional automation. This is where driving is completed by an automated driving system, but it is expected that the driver can respond appropriately as and when needed. Such systems are currently being used, for example, shuttle services in downtown Columbus, Ohio, which was implemented way back 3 years back. Yeah. So this is already there and it's been adapted to the traffic conditions of the downtown area. Level 4 is high automation. This is when the human driver does not need to respond appropriately if needed, but there are still provisions for the human driver to use the vehicle. Last, is level 5, that is full automation. That means where all aspects of driving, including parking, maneuvering traffic, everything is completed by the driver assistance program systems, and no human intervention is required. These vehicles are said to not even have the steering wheel in them. Well, Tesla promises that a fully automated vehicle will be available this year. So let's see. There's one resource here about the Automated Vehicle Comprehensive Plan. Of course, this is made specifically for the US, but if it's interesting, it's a good resource to look at. Now, there are implications of automated vehicles as well. The same way monitoring systems had their implications. So now vehicles need to be equipped with data processing and communication technology so they can communicate with each other. That is called vehicle-to-vehicle communication. The infrastructure itself needs to communicate sometimes to the vehicles. So that is called vehicle-to-infrastructure communication. So for example, in vehicle-to-vehicle interaction, two vehicles made by two different manufacturers. If we want them to talk to each other and communicate with each other, we need to enable this kind of communication. Now, vehicle to infrastructure, for example, speed limitations or traffic lights need to be equipped also with data sensing and data storage devices to be able to send signals for better movement on the road. Now, vehicle to everything is pretty self-explanatory, just apart from only vehicles to and infrastructures. If you want your vehicle to be able to interact with something else, that should also have the capacity to generate and transmit data. Now, automated vehicles and ICTs used in automated vehicles also have their implications on the infrastructure, on data and services. On the infrastructure, we already looked at it. On data, just as before, data standardization is extremely important, especially from different manufacturers or from a car speaking to a bus. Ownership of data is also very, very critical. Who owns the data? Is it the consumer or the vehicle manufacturer? Or is it the public authority? Now, for those who are owning the data, a good question to also ask is what is the pricing of this data and to what extent can this data be sold to third-party companies? And last but not the least, the security of the data, because misuse of self-driving vehicles can be very, very dangerous. At the service level, accountability is at the key. In case of a road accident, who is to blame? Is it the car user, or is it the company, the transportation company, or is it the insurance company? Another thing to consider is the social acceptance of these vehicle technologies. The acceptance may not be the same from one place to another. From different countries, it may vary due to the social classes, the age groups, the different physical abilities of the people. And this is important when we think about not only private cars, but also self-driving public vehicles. Last but not the least, institutional changes. They have their implications as well. For example, public authorities might need to evolve their driving code. With self-driving vehicles, do we even need a driving license anymore? These kind of decisions need to be made. Now we have looked at the improvement paradigm. We have looked at how ICTs can be used with monitoring and automated vehicles to improve the systems, to move from legacy to smart systems. But then the second aspect was the shift paradigm. We need to talk about shifting the behaviors of people from ownership to usership, and then from private vehicles to public transportation. Now we will see, well, thanks to ICTs and especially geolocation services, mobility services partly rely on a sharing-based economy. And in the last 15 to 20 years, we have seen a lot of new services that have come up, namely car sharing services where you can use your cell phone to find a car sharing station where it is located, book a car, even pay for it online, use it, and drop it off at the next the next station that you can find. All of this without interacting with a human being. Car2Go is a good example of a company doing this. Then we have carpooling. If you own a vehicle and you are able to enter your origin and your destination information onto the system, if there is someone else who's making the exact same trip, they can join you, and this can reduce one entire vehicle on the road and emissions corresponding to it. This is called carpooling, and the French company BlaBlaCar is one of the leading companies doing this. Then we have rideshare, which is our Uber and Ola systems, where in any country, most countries, and at any time of the day, you are able to use your smartphone to call for transportation service to take you in places. Now, some of these have also the capacity of becoming driverless. For example, Uber is launching its driverless fleet in Pittsburgh, United States, very soon. So we are at the edge of a real paradigm shift of an urban transportation system that is facilitated by these ICTs. So these new ICT facilitated services are impacting both public and private modes of transportation. They affect the need for urban dwellers to not own their own car and make mobility solutions more accessible. And yeah, pretty much that. And integration of multiple different transportation systems is what gives us our smart mobility systems. Now, there is a paradigm shift happening from within transportation, from mobility, which is moving car ownership to usership, but many of these new mobility modes are redundant and difficult to find in the complexity of our cities. Therefore, this calls for more integration and cross-modal connectivity. So all mobility models, they are now producing data, right? So this it becomes possible to integrate this data under different schemes. The first scheme is known as the integrated ticketing system. As you may know, more famously known as smart cards or single payment cards. These are used for as single ticketing systems to access different mobility services and to be able to pay for them. For example, in Seoul, in South Korea, the card is accepted on buses, metros, suburban trains, and even to pay taxis. So this is kind of a public semi-private transportation solution. Next is the integrated mobility platforms. Integrated mobility platforms correspond to the facilitated ICTs when the user has, say, for example, a smartphone, and it has an app that helps provide information from various different transportation providers about the trip that they are planning to make. So now, using all of this different information, the user is able to decide which provider they want to use or which mode of transportation they want to use based on how long the trip will take, how much it will cost, and if you are environmentally crazy like me, then how much carbon is being emitted. A lot of this information can be integrated into one single source. So, but we also have to look at ultimately the more recent ideas that are being used in mobility services is mobility as a service technology. So this is kind of a model in which major transportation systems use a single interface. So here it's kind of like bundled monthly packages similar to your mobile phone price package that you probably have, or you can imagine it to be like a Netflix for transportation. It is a platform where you pay monthly fees and have access to mobility solutions and services depending on the package you have paid for, and then you renew it month monthly or annually by the subscription package that you're paying. And each subscription package will have different modes of transportation in it. So this mass mobility as a service is pretty new. It's still in its very nascent phases and it's not been tested that much. But together, an integration of all of these will really improve user experience. It would make public transportation and hybrid transportation solutions more attractive and more serious alternative to a private use of car. And this also helps reduce congestion and make our transportation systems more efficient and sustainable. Now, the mobility services also have implications on the infrastructure services and the digital layer. Let's look at some of these implications. So on the infrastructure layer, infrastructure financing is a big deal. New models need to be created to develop such that it can guarantee the quality of transportation services, which translates to investments in the infrastructure systems around transportation. Nowadays, many different mobility services are using transportation infrastructure, but these transportation infrastructures are financed only by public funds. So new mechanisms on how to finance and how to cope with this rapid growth of digitization can be done is crucial to be looked at. For one example is the Google's proposal of self-financing transit systems in Toronto. That is a good example of this. In the data layer, one must make sure that the data is interoperable and exchangeable. That is, transportation providers must be able to interact and exchange this data with all the other service providers. Now, data from different mobility providers should reach the same level of quality and reliability, and of course, be protected to guarantee security for the customers. At the service layer, coordination between mobility services can be achieved to avoid redundancy and repetition. To ensure complementary and different transportation modes, public authorities must regulate. So basically, they should regulate the old systems and the new systems in a way that they can coordinate with each other because they're using the same playground, they're using the same roads and the infrastructures. Last but not the least, new business models. New business models have to be divided between platform operators and mobility service providers to go into the subscription formula and begin adapting mobility as a service model and other innovative models to continue growing and keeping up with times. So now that we've spoken about some of these emerging business models, let's look into some examples of what emerging business models we are seeing in transportation. One is the device-centric model, which is based on a consumer being devoted to a particular brand, such as Apple or Tesla, and primary revenue is generated by paying for the services that come with this ecosystem. Intermediate platforms, thanks to the internet revolution, is helping direct transitions between service providers and users. The revenue model is a commission generated every time a transaction is being made. Pay-as-you-use services are, again, a very new paradigm. They are one of the most critical models enabling the shift from ownership to usership. And also, consumers pay for monthly fees, reducing their overall otherwise costs spent. Also, low-cost services like low-cost flights also use pay-as-you-use, but more about pay for the services you use. Now, if you don't want an extra luggage piece, you don't have to pay for it. That's their model. The self-financing model that we spoke about, this is a very, very new model. This, for me, I have seen it only as Google's recommendation for Toronto. This is the idea of charging future prices today itself. So for example, when a new metro station is developed in a particular given space, the land value of that area goes up. And we know that. So since we know that, we can project what this new value is going to be and start charging people from now itself for that new value and move that funding to promote expansion of the metro system or something else that will self-finance those infrastructures. Then we have the data-centric models, which are based on processing data. They generally provide customers with free, high-quality services in exchange for all the data that is being gathered by, generated by the user. If it's free, you know that you are the product. And one of the biggest giants doing this is Google, which is probably one of the best examples. And they have a series of valuable products to use, especially in transportation, including Maps, Live Transit, Google Flight, and so many different options. And another recent and new business model is the decentralized open services. This is based on the blockchain technologies, which decentralizes services to allow users and the public to be able to feed data into the moving parts of making this mobility services accessible. This is very new, and it's being tested and tried in places like Berlin, but there's not much information about the successes of this. Anyway, so these emerging business models are disrupting the urban mobility ecosystem as we know it. They are inventing smarter ways to meet urban mobility infrastructure challenges. They are providing citizens with customized and on-demand services and developing green solutions. The new players, the new technology companies that enter this value chain through customer-related activities, they are investing massively in customer acquisition, whereas the traditional players are still heavily investing in infrastructure. So now we have seen how the evolution of smart mobility systems, all the way from the basic idea of the cities, from cities to smart transportation to the mobility services that we have, and how to put this into the real world by thinking about it in terms of business models and applications. So we have kind of completed the entire spectrum of public transportation at this point within the smart cities idea. Now I would like to move into more practical examples and look at a few case studies. We today will be looking at 4 different locations, 2 abroad, 2 in India. Of course, smart cities across the world and including India have their own goals and objectives, and how they want to approach people and improve the user, the customer's experiences, how to improve the quality of life for its citizens. So each country has its missions very differently prepared. In the world, these are by the Association of Mechanical Engineers. This is the top 10 cities that are widely recognized for leading the way in smart cities in the world. This is an early 2020 ranking, so things might have changed, but these 10 cities definitely are worth looking at for benchmarking and best practice analysis. Now, in India, we have the Smart Cities Mission, which was launched in 2015. And the goal was to create 100 smart cities in India. But before 2015 itself, we had a few cities that were already embarking on this initiative, such as Ambi Valley, we had Lavasa, and we had a few other private investments. But within the Smart Cities Mission, the guidelines are provided by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which states that there are 2 major components: area-based development and pan-city development. These are some links that I've placed over here that you can go to and kind of read in detail what that is. Area-based development is mainly aiming at implementing strategies only in one particular area with essential features that can be replicated over time across the entire city. And then pan-city developments are envisioning applications that can be applied throughout the city with the use of technology, information, and data. So for example, these are what the Smart City Mission is proposing. So the area-based development in Smart Cities mission is, it includes retrofitting, urban renewal, and redevelopment. Greenfield development, in addition to the system-wide programs, is referred to as the pan-city development. While retrofitting cities will focus on adaptive reuse and planning in an existing built-up area to achieve smart city objectives, redevelopment will try to include replacement of existing built-up infrastructures to create enhanced systems with a mix of land use and increased density perspectives. Now, infill development is a mechanism to incorporate smart solutions for vacant lots using innovative planning, financing, and implementation tools. Now, the government of India is specifically stressing on the urban mobilities issues. It has stated that the building blocks of smart cities in India should definitely include efficient urban mobility and public transportation systems, and they are very integral to the smooth operations of a city. In particularly, it has identified 3 key points for efficient urban mobility, that is smart parking, intelligent traffic management, and integrated multimodal transportation. Such measures are largely ineffective if there is not a parallel shift in providing safe, punctual, and comfortable public transportation systems that are suited for our societies. Now, going into our first case study, looking at Singapore. Singapore has received the title of being the world's smartest city. It is doing everything right according to the smart city perspectives. It has a very strong economical system. The 4 layers that we spoke about that comprise of a city, the economical system is the strongest in Singapore for its growth and competitiveness. It has a very strong government that is able to, that has a very strong control over the land. And another interesting fact is that Singapore is one of the most densely populated independent countries in the world. Now, kind of setting a context for Singapore, it is very, very planned. It's got everything under surveillance. Everything is by the book. It has a very strong economy. It is 4th in the world GDP. It has very strict policies and control of land, as I previously mentioned. And it has very strong internet connectivity. And it's looking into even developing, experimenting with the 5G and even 6G technologies. It is already a pretty intelligent city with a lot of smart technologies already in place. The challenge that Singapore faces is its geographical and natural location, which is being so close to the equator. It's really hot and it's surrounded by water, so it does not have too much scope to grow. It has a very quickly increasing population, and there is a shift of age in the population towards a more senior and elderly population. Now, land is very limited because we know Singapore is tiny. And within this available land, only 12% is available for roads. And with the increasing population, the increase in vehicle ownership is also seen. So what it's trying to do within its transportation, smart transportation initiatives. It's thinking about all age groups. It's focusing on public transportation. It's heavily involving the public and building skills. It's performing awareness and skill development programs within the public and its government counterparts. And it's using green, clean tech to come up with sustainable solutions. Why it's doing this? I mean, we already saw because of the growing elderly population, land availability, and vehicle usage. These are some of the smart solutions that Singapore is able to apply. The autonomous vehicle, which is not going to be only for young and trendy people, but also mobility for elderly and the disabled. Contactless payment, this is the smart card idea. On-demand shuttle, whenever public transit is not available and you really need to go from one place to another, you can call for the on-demand shuttle. Open data analytics. So this is public data sets that's open to everyone, and this really empowers citizens and the government to kind of work together to address challenges. And the most interesting part is it is spearheading research in its own self-driving vehicle policies. So it's not using a copy-paste approach, but it is conducting rigorous research to understand what really would fit well for the public roads of Singapore. So some lessons that we can take, it's kind of already been said before. So the big part of this is it has a very strong guiding vision. The three key pillars that it's working on is economy, government, and society. It's integrating the idea of people, companies, and governance all together in one, in their approach. It has a very strong governance and leadership model, and the city's perspective that we spoke about is very, very strong in Singapore's case. Citizen and stakeholders are very, very well engaged, and the own research to find specific solutions for the city is very impressive. And even with innovative technologies being present, Singapore is implementing everything incrementally, one at a time, step by step. It's not going to the final solution before figuring out how to actually get there. There's a good cross-departmental collaboration as well. So if you want to check a little more about their initiatives, this is a link for that. So now moving into the number one city for India. Sorry, I'm just going to go back there. Okay, so Bhubaneswar, this is the first city to be selected within the smart cities mission in India. It has a very dominant social and cultural system that is predominant in the city, that as we see it. The proposal that that Bhubaneswar prepared for Smart Cities Mission has won several awards worldwide, and it's been applauded for its approach and its citizen engagement efforts. So what does the proposal really say? Just a context, about 10 lakh population spread across about 150 square kilometer area. It has, so about 30% of Bhubaneswar's population voted on the decisions, and the citizens continue to stay involved in the decisions that they're making through the Smart City initiative. So the area-based development was focused on the town center, which comprises of projects like water supply, energy infrastructure, multi-level car parking, parks and lake development, etc. Pan-city solutions include traffic and transit management, parking, emergency response, a common payment card, and e-governance and a command control center. A little bit of a context, some strengths that Bhubaneswar has is that it is a planned city. Not many people know that. But in 1946, a German architect called Otto Konigsberger designed and helped make Bhubaneswar what it is. And it has a growing IT investment in the region. It is emerging with some new technical and healthcare facilities, and it has actually a lot of tourism income coming in from it being a heritage city and a city of temples, and with the golden tourism triangle along with Puri and which is that other temple there? Yeah, so in Odisha. So challenges that Bhubaneswar faces is, like most other Indian cities, a lot of population lives in slums, and including the people living in slums and elderly and not educated people don't have access to technology and city services. There's a growing divide. So the existing right-of-way, that is the existing space available for transportation, is being underutilized by 42%. And it's been very difficult for the government to create a shift from owning private cars to using public transportation. Also, enforcement of rules and regulations is actually a pretty big challenge for the city. So what it's really trying to do, it's trying to develop a transit-oriented development system with a compact form that connects a lot of different transportation modes. Why? Because out of all the transportation modes, only 10% is public transportation. And they have only one bus depot with 3 terminals operating 165 buses, which is not a lot, but with the city that's planning to grow, they probably need more infrastructure here. Bus stops don't have shelter. There's no much control over parking encroachments. There's congestion, lack of non-motorized transportation, and unorganized improved public transportation. So in this graphic, you can see that the railway station, the plan is to integrate the railway station and the bus terminal, which are located actually right next to each other, along with few other services, including rainwater harvesting, shared parking, and so many other things. This is going to be the hub, the multimodal hub. So that is one of the proposals in the area-based development, the multimodal integration. Apart from this, non-motorized zones, that is pedestrian-friendly roadways, that is being looked at. Complete streets is a policy framework that allows street design to accommodate all different modes of transportation and public spaces. We are looking at connecting the NMT network for a continuous flow of pedestrian and cycling network, a public bike sharing system, and a rickshaw management system. So these are actually some of the images that I took when I was in Bhubaneswar, kind of studying firsthand as a user how the smart city implementation looks. And I tell you the truth, I was pretty impressed. On a pan city point of view, they are looking into intelligent traffic management, transit operations, parking management, emergency response, and common payment cards. Now, this is pretty detailed, so if you're interested, you can look into this at a later point to see everything. But the idea is to use all of these new systems, plug it in with existing services systems, and that feeds into the command control center. And this is where the remote processing and analyzing systems are going to be placed with e-governance and healthy governance models to redistribute the analyzed data back into other departments and to the citizens. So what is happening right now? Is it really working? They have installed some traffic light systems. The command control center's construction has started. They have developed their smart card. It's yet to be implemented. And a lot of push in moving to active transportation, cycling, and public transportation is happening. But is it entirely working? Well, the enforcement part is still weak. As we can see, bike lanes and bus lanes are being used as parking and also by cows. So maybe smart cities need to address our stray guests too. So these are some of the resources giving us more insights into what Bhubaneswar was proposing. Our third case study is from Jaipur. Well, not everything has to look amazing, and that's what we're going to see here. Now, Jaipur has its social and economic layer highly intertwined due to its heritage, its culture, and its heavy tourism economy. This Jaipur qualified in the second round of the Smart City Challenge. It envisions to develop on the basis of heritage and tourism, apply innovative solutions to improve the quality of life of people. Now, about 4.75% of the population only engaged initially, but they did receive quite a lot of comments. Out of 53% of the population that they reached, only 4.75% of the population actually responded. Now, traffic and transportation was voted by 41% as the #1 priority. So what did this proposal really say? So it, as we said, that it wants to leverage on its heritage and tourism aspects. The area-based proposal in terms of transportation wants to promote walkability and green mobility solutions. And in the Pan City idea, it wants to integrate ICTs to develop smart mobility models and overall improve the quality of life of people. So this is kind of a graphic that they created, which is very futuristic. Now, what's the context? Let's just set a context for Jaipur. It's actually got a pretty high GDP. It ranks 10th in India. It has a very strong tourism, heritage, culture, and arts economy. The Delhi, Agra, Jaipur Golden Tourism Triangle brings so many visitors to Jaipur every year. The existing public transportation system is fairly okay given its coverage. And it's beginning to see some IT investments, and it does have healthcare and a lot of other facilities in there. Some of the challenges. Well, a city needs a comprehensive plan. It needs something as a blueprint to continue. The previous one that was made back in 2010, that never materialized, and then there has never been an update after. It faces extreme climatic conditions and it lacks energy sources, especially for water. And when COVID-19 kind of pandemics hit, and if it's going to rely heavily on tourism economy, that is a problem. It has high crime rate. The heritage and the old architecture is not so adaptable to all of the new technologies that we're trying to talk about. And there are a lot of road safety issues, including congestion and fatalities. So what are the needs and goals? So Jaipur wants to increase its public transportation share from 21% to 45% and reduce fatalities, improve air quality, and so on and so forth. A lot of these things which kind of are covered within the idea of the smart cities mission. Why? Because it's facing long commute times, lack of parking, no walking infrastructure, unpredictable bus service, cleanliness, and the focus has been highly on tourism and not so much on citizen needs. Some of the solutions that it's trying to use actually very simple compared to the futuristic image that it was showing. Just a fare card, a common integrated ticketing system, a command control center, and a passenger or a public information system using mobile apps and web portal. But even with something so simple, it's not able to do much. Only beautification and some restoration work is done. It has the progress is stalled because of financial crunch and no support from successive governments. And the project does not involve the citizens anymore. And few projects have proceeded, like the NMT corridor and the bicycle scheme, but there's no specific set of policies guiding them. So the continuity and the utility of these systems is a little questionable. This is the link if you want to read the proposal. Moving into Toronto. So this is where I am. It's a very interesting city. It has a lot going on. In 2017, Google decided to come and experiment in Toronto. It wanted to bring about ideas and technologies that have never been implemented before and wanted to create a neighborhood that is built from internet up. That means first think about internet and then everything else. So it was going to be a test bed for brand new technologies and to build smarter, greener, and more inclusive cities. So the proposal looked something like this. So phase one was going to be only a small little space that looks like this right now. And the proposal was to make it look like this. And then once this was completed, it was going to go into more about 77 hectares. A lot of people were engaged and a lot more were reached to. And finally, four huge books of plans were produced in June 2019 as the draft plan. Some context. It's a world-class city, technology leader in Canada, so close to America, so a lot of benefits coming from the US market too. Has a very diverse population. More than half of Toronto's population is not born in Toronto. It has a very strong multimodal transportation system, and it already has a lot of smart aspects. It already has some connected cards. It has its digital water services already put into place, blockchain, big data, and it was also awarded the Intelligent Community in 2014. Some challenges. It's already a very strong developed market. So coming into an already existing market is a challenge. It requires a lot of innovation, a lot of governance, and a lot of coordination between the moving parts. Large immigration and rapid population growth is causing inequalities. There is inequality in income. There is a huge digital divide. The inequality in income is creating unaffordable transportation systems. Some people are not able to afford the buses here. There is traffic congestion and management. Yes, cars are still more, even with their multimodal transit systems, cars dominate the city, and there is no centralized digital infrastructure policy. So what they're trying to do is they want to reduce the need of a car, reduce greenhouse gases by 89%, increase transit, walking, and cycling facilities, and 91% increase in pedestrian space. Why they want to do this is because they want to lead the way. They want to be the most innovative district in the world. And as we already saw from challenges, the rapid urbanization is threatening inclusivity and affordability, along with congestion and climate impacts. So what are some of the solutions that it's trying to use? A lot. There are going to be sensors everywhere, from gathering data on weather, traffic, everything. IoT is going to dominate the public spaces. The self-financed public transit systems that we spoke about earlier is where this is coming from. To impose a future charge on real estate development in the present itself against to generate a stream of funds to finance the construction of the transit system. So that is a very new idea. And then they are going with the mobility subscription package, so mobility as a service, a lot of these things. So I'm not going to go into each of this, but they have a lot of innovative ideas, including heated bike lanes so that people can bike in the winter. So a lot of new ideas, a lot of technology, a lot of different solutions. Everything put together. What do you think? Do you think this would work? Well, the answer is in April 2020, Google left. One night, overnight, they wrote a letter, okay, we are out. What happened is way too many things. They did not have support from citizens, which was the biggest reason. Citizens did not trust what Google was doing. There was a very strong vendor perspective, and the city was confused. The citizens were unhappy. There was no regulatory mechanism from the city's perspective to overlook what Google is doing. So there were a lot of concerns on data security and privacy. They actually, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association even filed a lawsuit against the government for this. The city tried to salvage, they tried to work it out through a digital infrastructure plan and policies for managing these kind of infrastructures in the city. And that's where I firsthand worked on. These are some of the resources to look at what it was before it pulled out. And Toronto is a good example to see what not to do when thinking of smart cities. So we have seen how smart cities can be really challenging, how they can pose so many different problems in implementation of smart cities. Smart cities bring people together. They bring economy, technology, environment, and create processes that can enable holistic approaches for betterment of the city's culture, the long-term planning, and citizens' needs. This requires comprehensive development of the physical and the institutional needs of the city. And all of this should help in the good cycle of growth and development of the city. For example, long-range planning and visioning is very important. Equitable civic engagement is very important. Equitable, by equitable, what I mean is not engaging the same 10 people who show up, but reaching out to others like women, like elderly, like low-income people, all of these people who don't usually have a voice. Smart governance is very important, not only in terms of ownership and enforcement, but also capacity building, continued learning, and relationship management and maintenance of these systems. Strong policies are required too. Smart solutions should be put into place. Yes, that's the entire idea of technology in smart cities, but they should be environmentally friendly, generate innovative ideas, and use and improve user experience. Solutions should be customized. One size does not fit all. And complex, as we saw in Toronto, is not always smart. And finally, and most importantly, a balanced city and vendor perspective. Technology should be what the citizens need and not the other way around. Technology is not what companies want to test or sell. This is an extra resource. I kind of took an interview with Mr. Kukreja of Schneider Electric. I'm not going to play it right now because we don't have time, but if anyone is interested. I just want to quickly touch upon what is happening in Bangalore before we close. So Bangalore got selected in round 3. It has a lot of plans underway. The comprehensive mobility plan has actually been finalized. And in fact, I did help in providing some comments there. And then the Directorate of Urban Land Transportation is the unified body that is overlooking mobility in Bangalore. So the proposal, you can read more about it here, but it suggests the development of Shivaji Nagar bus stand, Russell Market, and Kempegowda bus stand. So it's not very complicated. So I feel like it has chances of successful implementation. The first idea is to have a connected smart card. Now, some context about Bangalore. This is not really unknown to all of us over here in this meeting today. So I'm just going to skip over this, but there are some good points that Bangalore has, good points here, and some negative aspects that Bangalore has. And we can really capitalize on the good points and try to reduce the negatives. My suggestion for proposed focus areas should be, of course, citizen engagement, equitable engagement. Fix the existing broken infrastructure first. Get footpaths, get our potholes repaired. Remove all those loose hanging wires and garbage thrown around. Fix the infrastructure before we go into high-tech solutions. Then we need to shift behavior. We have to discourage people from using cars for everything. We have to try to get cycling, walking, and public transportation use improved. Reducing cars can be done by de-incentivizing cars, having paid public parking, fuel taxes, limiting cars per household, and so many different ideas. Alternative fuels is an idea. Integrated mobility, pretty much everything that we have covered. Single smart card, public information systems, not only as a mobile phone app, but also on our streets, on bus stops, in the metro stations. And of course, public safety and security, whether it is directly for the people or for the data. Finally, I would like to end on the note that it doesn't matter whether you are in Bangalore, Beijing, Paris, London, or whatever else. The trend today is incentivizing public transportation, and more people are leaving their private vehicles and thinking about cycles, about walking, about buses, about metros. And as the mayor of Columbia once said, the developed country is not a place where the poor have cars, but where the rich can use public transportation. So on this note, I would like to end. Thank you, everyone. Again, my contact information is here. The best way to reach me is either by email or on LinkedIn. Thank you.